In my past life, my roommate bought me coffee every day. After one semester, she was recommended for admission to a prestigious university, while I was framed for cheating, expelled from school, my parents' company went bankrupt, and my whole family ended up homeless. When I opened my eyes again, I took the coffee she handed me and poured it into the pot of the already withered green plant in the dorm. I was awakened by that familiar scent, not the smell of hospital disinfectant, nor the damp, musty odor of a street bench, but the cheap, instant, slightly sweet aroma of coffee with powdered creamer. I suddenly opened my eyes. Sunlight slanted in through the dorm window, illuminating the desk opposite, with dust floating lazily in the beam of light. My bed curtain had been pulled open a crack, and a pale hand was carefully passing through a steaming cup of coffee. Xiaoqing, wake up, drink it while it's hot. This voice was like a rusted knife, slowly stabbing into my heart, then twisting, the pain so intense I could barely breathe. Suqin, my best roommate, the one who brought me coffee every day, stayed up late with me to study, and was the only one who stood up and said, "I believe Xiaoqing isn't that kind of person." When the whole department doubted me, she was also the executioner who personally pushed me into hell. I lay motionless in bed, my mind like an old-fashioned film projector whirring. Images flickering frame by frame. I saw myself standing in the department office. Professor Zhang slapped the cheat sheet with the answers written on it in front of me, asking if it was my handwriting. I said no. I didn't recognize that note. The way he looked at me was like looking at a pile of garbage. I saw Suqin standing in the crowd, covering her mouth, her eyes red, looking as if she wanted to speak up for me but didn't dare. Later, I found out that she had slipped that cheat sheet into my pencil case while I was napping. She had imitated my handwriting for an entire semester, asking me questions every day while holding my homework. What could I say? I saw my dad, that proud man who had worked hard all his life, receiving a call from the school saying his daughter had cheated. He rushed home from an out-of-town construction site the day I was caught, driving while fatigued, and his truck overturned into a ravine. When my mom got the news, she collapsed stiffly like a log, hitting the back of her head on the corner of the coffee table, blood pooling on the floor. I saw the company, left unattended, being swindled dry by the partners. I saw my mom, still not fully recovered, dragging herself around begging for help, returning with one high heel broken and nail marks all over her face. I saw myself expelled from school, unable to find a job with a disciplinary record, squatting on the street looking at the house that once belonged to my family. Lights on in the windows, strangers living inside. I saw Suqin, recommended for admission to the graduate school everyone wanted to attend, posting a photo on social media of herself standing at the school gate, smiling brightly in the sun, with the caption, "A new beginning, grateful for those who have accompanied me along the way." Beneath that post, the suffering of me and my entire family didn't even get a single like. Finally, I saw my mom lying under a bridge, using her last bit of strength to grab my hand and say she was cold, and then she stopped moving, and so did I. I yanked open the bed curtain, and Suqin was standing by my bed, wearing a light pink cotton pajama set, her hair casually tied up in a bun, revealing a smooth forehead and smiling eyes. She was pretty, the kind of clean, wholesome prettiness that made anyone who saw her think, "This girl is so kind." "Oh, you scared me," she said, shrinking back and clutching her chest. "You popped up like a ghost. What's wrong? Did you have a nightmare?" I looked at the coffee in her hand, still steaming, with fine droplets of condensation clinging to the cup. It was this cup of coffee, one a day, never missed. In my past life, I saw it as friendship, as warmth, as proof that she cared about me. Only later did I realize it was just her investment. The cost was so low it was negligible, but the returns were shockingly high. A cup of coffee in exchange for my trust, my homework, my exam seat, my life. "What a damn good deal, Xiaoqing," she said, a bit puzzled, holding the coffee out toward me. "What are you spacing out for? Take it quickly. It won't taste good if it gets cold." I reached out and took the coffee. Her smile deepened as she turned and walked toward her own desk. "Hurry up and get ready. The bell rings in 20 minutes. I didn't move. I looked down at the coffee in my hand, a paper cup, 3.5 yuan each, bought from the little stall at the school's back gate. In my past life, I drank it for an entire semester. By the end, if she didn't bring me one, I'd feel strange, wondering if I'd somehow offended her. What a brilliant conditioning strategy. In my past life, I took care of her for 3 years. She stayed up with me through countless sleepless nights, only to end up dying with me under a bridge. In this life, I slowly poured the coffee into the flower pot. The dark liquid dripped out from the holes at the bottom, landing on the floor I had just cleaned. Drip, drip. Suqin turned back, and the smile on her face froze, as if someone had hit The pause button, that look of shock, confusion, and even a hint of absurdity made the knot that had been lodged in my chest for 2 lifetimes loosen just a little. Xiaoqing, what are you doing? I placed the empty cup on the nightstand, picked up my jacket, rolled out of bed, and put on my shoes. I didn't look at her the entire time, but I could feel her gaze sticking to me like 2 slimy worms. There are worms in the basin, I said. Using coffee to kill the worms. She paused for a moment, then laughed again, this time a bit forced. What kind of joke is that? What worms can coffee kill? We're going to be late. Let's go. You go first. I picked up the wash basin, tossed the towel and toothbrush into it, and said, I'll wash up, then I'll wait for you. No need. Carrying the basin, I walked past her, pushed open the door, and entered the washroom. Someone was inside, a girl from the neighboring class brushing her teeth. She nodded at me as a greeting. I set the basin down, turned on the faucet, and as the cold water rushed over my hands, I finally managed to catch my breath. Those few minutes just now had drained me of what felt like a lifetime's worth of energy, not because of hatred, but because I was afraid I wouldn't be able to stop myself from strangling her right then and there. But I couldn't. In this life, I don't just want her to die, I want her to taste what it's like to fall from the clouds into the mud. I want her to experience the feeling of being abandoned by everyone, having nowhere to turn, and watching everything she cares about shatter one by one. Unable to hold on to anything, the cold water gushed out, and I stared at my reflection in the mirror. 18 years old, skin still dull from staying up late, dark circles under my eyes, hair a mess, this face so young it makes me want to cry. I still have a chance, Suchin. I crushed these 2 words in my heart, pieced them back together, and crushed them again. In this life, it's my turn to treat you to coffee. When I returned to the dorm, Suchin had already changed her clothes. She was sitting on my bed, holding the pot of pothose that had been watered with coffee, frowning as she examined the yellowing leaves. Xiaoqing, is this plant dead? She looked up at me. Look, all the leaves are yellow, and the roots are probably rotten too, right? Why don't we throw it away? I'll go with you to buy a new one later. I walked over, took the pot from her hands, and placed it on the windowsill. It's not dead, I said. I haven't let it die yet. She looked at me, something flashing in her eyes, too fast, so fast that if I hadn't lived 2 lifetimes, I wouldn't have noticed. It was confusion, wariness, and a hint of offended displeasure, but she suppressed it. All right, it's not dead, She stood up, clapping her hands. Let's go, we're really going to be late. You know how old Zhang is with his temper. I picked up my backpack and walked out the door with her. As we walked, she linked her arm with mine as usual, chatting affectionately about the drama she was watching yesterday, the new dishes in the cafeteria, and which department's guy was pursuing her roommate. I listened, occasionally humming in response, but my eyes were fixed on the people around us, young, vibrant, and still alive. I saw our class's study monitor, Li Nan, rushing past with a stack of books. His grades were average, but he was a steady person. In my past life, he got into our university's graduate program, later went to a research institute, and lived an ordinary life. I also saw that rich second-generation guy from the drama riding his bicycle past us, with a pretty girl sitting on the back seat. His father later went bankrupt, and he ended up delivering takeout. I saw him once on the street and almost didn't recognize him. I saw my life, all the things I once had and lost entirely, now laid out before me, waiting for me to reclaim them. Xiaoqing, Suchin tugged at me. What are you thinking about? I've been calling you for a while. I snapped back to reality. We had already reached the entrance of the teaching building. Nothing, I said. Just thought the weather was nice today. She looked up at the sky, overcast, with thick clouds. What good weather. She didn't ask further and pulled me into the building. The first class was advanced mathematics with Professor Zhang, nicknamed Old Man Zhang. He wasn't actually old, just in his early 50s, but he had a stern face and graying hair, making him look like he was in his 60s. He had a habit of asking questions in class. If you couldn't answer, he'd deduct 5 points from your final grade without mercy. In my past life, I was caught cheating by him. It was during his specialized course exam, and I was answering smoothly. He suddenly walked over to me, told me to stand up, and pulled out a folded piece of paper from my pencil case. Unfolding it, it was densely covered with formulas. Is this yours? I said no. He asked, then why is it in your pencil case? I said I didn't know. He stared at me for a full minute, then said, come to my office after class. Later, the whole world found out about it. That note not only had formulas but also my name, written in my handwriting. Suchin had practiced my handwriting for an entire semester, just for this moment, and this moment nearly cost my family their lives. Wang Xiaoqing. I suddenly looked up. Old Zhang stood at the podium, holding a piece of chalk, looking at me. The student by the window in the 3rd row, Wang Xiaoqing, please answer this Question. I stood up and saw a problem on the blackboard. It was a limit problem that could be solved using L'Hopital's rule, but it was a bit tricky. It required first using an equivalent infinitesimal substitution. The whole class was watching me. Suchin sat next to me, slightly tilting her head, a faint trace of worry at the corner of her mouth, but I could see it. There was no worry in her eyes. Only the anticipation of watching a show. She knew I was bad at advanced mathematics in my past life. I couldn't answer this question, and she tutored me privately for several days, moving me so much I almost offered myself to her. What a pity. This problem could be solved with L'Hopital's rule, but using it directly would only make it more complicated. I spoke, my voice steady. We should first replace the numerator with an equivalent infinitesimal. The result is infinity. The classroom fell silent for 2 seconds. Old Zhang raised an eyebrow, and Suchin's smile froze on her face. I sat down. Perfect. Old Zhang turned around and continued writing on the blackboard. Clear thinking, correct steps. However, the final result could be written as the limit does not exist. To be more precise, student Wang Xiaoqing has made great progress. I lowered my head, pretending to take notes, while Suchin shifted beside me. I could feel her looking at me, her gaze sweeping over my face as if inspecting something that had suddenly become unfamiliar. The bell rang for the end of class, and old Zhang packed up his things and left. I slowly organized my backpack. Suchin leaned over. You were amazing today. How did you know how to solve that problem? I remember you weren't very good with L'Hopital's rule before. I looked up at her and smiled. I dreamed of an old man teaching me how to do it last night. She was taken aback for a moment, then laughed along. Stop joking. Tell me, did you secretly take extra lessons? Confess. I really didn't. I zipped up my backpack. I just suddenly had a breakthrough. Well, you should have more breakthroughs then. She linked her arm with mine. Next time, help me out too. Let me have a breakthrough as well. I didn't say anything. The next class was English, followed by politics at noon after school. Suchin, as usual, pulled me to go to the cafeteria. I, as usual, told her to go ahead, saying I needed to return a book to the library. She hesitated for a moment but eventually left. I stood at the entrance of the teaching building, watching her figure disappear into the crowd, then turned and walked in the opposite direction. I didn't go to the library. I went to the department office. Old man Zhang was indeed still there. He was sitting behind his desk grading assignments. Hearing the knock, he looked up and was a bit surprised to see me. Wang Xiaoqing, is something the matter? I walked in and stood in front of him. Professor Zhang, I'd like to ask you something. Go ahead. Regarding the midterm exam next month, I'd like to request a change of exam venue. He put down his red pen and looked at me. Why? I took a deep breath, because I'm afraid someone might slip a cheat sheet into my pencil case and then frame me for bringing it myself. Sunlight streamed in through the window, falling on his graying hair and also on my young face. He didn't speak immediately, just looked at me, and I looked back at him. In my past life, I was too afraid of him, afraid of his sternness, afraid of his fairness, afraid he wouldn't believe me, but in this life, I realized that besides severity, there was also a deep weariness in his eyes, the kind that comes from seeing too many smart people do foolish things. Do you have any evidence? He finally asked. Not yet. Then what do you want me to do? I hope you'll remember what I said today. I replied, if something really happens on the day of the exam, please give me a chance to explain, not after I've been wrongfully accused. But from the very beginning he remained silent for a long time, so long that I thought he would ask me to leave, accuse me of being unreasonable, or say that he couldn't handle such baseless speculation, but he didn't. Instead, he said, all right, I've taken note of it. I bowed slightly, turned, and walked toward the door. Just as I reached the doorway, he suddenly called out to me, Wang Xiaoqing. I turned back. Do you know why you answered that question so well just now? I was taken aback. Because your reasoning was clear, your steps were rigorous, and you dared to use equivalent infinitesimals. Many students are too afraid to use them, worried they'll make a mistake, but that's how math is. The more you fear, the more likely you are to err. The same goes for life. After saying this, he lowered his head again and continued grading assignments. I stood at the door, watching the back of his head, and suddenly felt my eyes grow a little warm. In my past life, when everyone doubted me, he said nothing. He simply followed the rules, gave my exam a 0, and reported my name to the academic affairs office. I used to resent him for not believing in me, but now I understand. It wasn't that he didn't believe me, it was that he trusted the rules too much. The rules stated that the notes were mine, found in my pencil case, so it was considered cheating on my part. He had neither the means nor the obligation to question the rules themselves, so I can't blame him. The one I should blame is the person who used those rules to destroy me. I walked out of the office. The sky outside was still overcast, but it seemed a little brighter to me. My phone rang, a message from Suchin. Xiaoqing, where are you? I got you some food, come back and eat before it gets cold. I smiled at the message and replied, coming. Then I slipped my phone into my pocket. On my way back to the dorm, I passed by the coffee stall again. The owner recognized me and called out from a distance, "Hey, miss. Not getting a cup today?" I stopped and looked at her. "Auntie, can I ask you something? Who's been buying coffee for me every day?" "That girl is my roommate. What time does she usually come to buy it?" The owner thought for a moment. "Right before your morning classes, around 7:30, she comes at the same time every day, and she always buys just one cup." "Yeah, just one." I nodded, thanked him, and continued on my way, buying only one cup a day. But I distinctly remember in my previous life, there was one time when I woke up early and went to buy coffee with him. He bought 2 cups, saying one for each of us. At the time, I was so moved that I said there was no need to be so polite, I could buy my own. He said it was just a habit, something he did without thinking, but now I realize that habit was fake from start to finish. He only bought 1 cup because that cup was always meant for the investment target. Who knows what he drank himself? Maybe he didn't even like coffee at all. He just needed it as a prop. Back in the dorm, Suchin had already set the food on the table, 2 identical plates of green pepper and shredded pork over rice, still steaming hot. Come on, she called out, "I'm starving, been waiting for you forever." I sat down, picked up my chopsticks, and took a bite. The green peppers were a bit spicy, the shredded pork a bit tough, and the rice a bit hard, exactly the same taste as in my previous life. "Is it good?" she asked. "Yes, it's good." She smiled and lowered her head to start eating. As I ate, I glanced at her out of the corner of my eye. She ate very delicately, taking small bites and chewing slowly, occasionally looking up at me with a smile before continuing. This was the person who, with a 350 cup of coffee, 2 cafeteria meals, and a few words of "I believe in you," took everything from me. I finished the last bite of rice and put down my chopsticks. "Suchin, how's your review going for the midterm next month?" She paused for a moment, then smiled. "Haven't started yet. What's the rush? Why are you going to help me review?" "Sure," I said. "We'll start tonight, together." Her eyes lit up. "Really? That's great. I knew you were the best." I didn't say anything, just smiled. Outside the window, the pot of pothos that had been watered with coffee stood quietly on the windowsill. The yellow leaves were still yellow, drooping limply, but I noticed that near the roots, there seemed to be a hint of green too. I became a superhuman. True to her word, Suchin didn't hold back when it came to studying together. That very night, she carried a pile of books over to my bedside, opened her notebook, and pointed to the densely packed words, asking, "This problem, I can't get this step right no matter how I calculate it. Can you take a look?" I took it and glanced at it. It was a calculus-proof problem, a bit tricky but not too difficult. In my previous life, she had explained this very problem to me, spending a whole hour on it. By the end, I was too embarrassed to admit I still didn't understand, so I just nodded and said I got it. Later, a similar problem appeared on the exam, and I answered it correctly, feeling grateful to her for a long time now. Looking at this problem and his expression of humble inquiry, I suddenly feel like laughing. Every single problem he explained to me was one he already knew inside out. The time he spent teaching me wasn't to help me. It was to get me accustomed to his kindness, to make me trust his help without question at critical moments. What a profitable deal, this problem. I tapped the step with my pen tip. "Your reasoning is off here. You shouldn't jump straight to the answer. You should start by substituting. Let t equal 1/5. Then, as I speak, I write, and in just a few strokes, I derive the correct answer." Suchin looks at my scratch paper, her expression somewhat complicated. Xiaoqing, she lifts her head. "You're really acting strange today." My heart skips a beat, but I keep my expression neutral. "Strange how? It's just," she pauses, as if searching for the right words. "You never really got these problems before. I was always the one teaching you. How come it suddenly feels like you know everything today?" This question was bound to come up sooner or later. Having lived 2 lifetimes, if I couldn't handle this kind of probing, I might as well have died for nothing. Maybe I just had a breakthrough. I shrug. I dreamed about my grandma last night, when she was alive. She always told me that some hurdles in life can't be overcome because the time isn't right yet. When the time comes, they naturally pass. Maybe my time has just come. Suchin stares at me for several seconds, then bursts out laughing. "That dream of yours was really worth it." She gathers up my scratch paper. "All right, then from now on, you're my walking dictionary. I'll ask you whenever I don't know something." I don't respond. She hugs her books and returns to her own bed, pulling the curtain shut. The light from her desk lamp glows from within. I lie down too, staring at the ceiling. I Didn't lie to her about the time has come, all those things I couldn't learn in my previous life, I suddenly understand in this one. It's not because being reborn made me smarter, it's because I died once. When a person dies once, they learn what truly matters, those formulas, those theorems, those exam questions. Back then, I found them difficult because I felt they were far removed from me. Once the exam was over, I'd forget them. Even if I didn't learn them, I could muddle through, but later, during those days wandering the streets, I couldn't do anything except remember, recalling what the teachers had said in class, the books I'd flipped through in the library, every day I should have taken seriously but had just glossed over. Hungry, I'd work through problems in my mind, over and over again, no paper, no pen, no textbooks, just memory. Getting them right didn't earn me extra points. Getting them wrong didn't cost me any, but I wanted to solve them anyway, because it was the only thing that made me feel alive. Now, all those day and night recollections have become my capital. The next morning when I woke up, Suchin was no longer in her bed curtain was drawn open, and the blanket was neatly folded. I glanced at the time, 7:30, exactly when she usually went to buy coffee. I lay back down, staring at the bedboard above me, and waited for 10 minutes. The back door opened, and Suchin walked in holding 2 cups of coffee. Seeing I was awake, she smiled and shook the cups in her hand. Perfect timing. Drink it while it's hot. She handed one of the cups to me, and I took it and placed it on the nightstand. Why aren't you drinking? She asked. Didn't you say there were bugs in the pot yesterday? I moved that pot of flowers outside the windowsill for you today, so there are no bugs now. I didn't say anything, just looked at her. She was wearing a white hoodie today, her hair tied up in a high ponytail, with that clean and warm smile on her face. Sunlight streamed in through the window, falling on her, making her look like the kind of good girl who would lend a helping hand when others were in trouble. If I hadn't died once, I would have thought the same. Suchin, I suddenly spoke up. You bring me coffee every day, but do you drink it yourself? She paused for a moment, then laughed. Of course, I finished my own cup on the way. Really? I nodded. Did you drink yours today? Her smile froze for a fraction of a second, so fast that a normal person wouldn't have noticed, but I did. Why? Her voice tightened slightly. Why are you asking? I didn't answer, just picked up the cup of coffee, unscrewed the lid, and slowly poured it into the trash can beside the bed. The brown liquid flowed into the garbage bag, soaking the waste paper and snack wrappers inside. Suchin's expression changed, not the kind of anger from being exposed, but a suppressed, forcibly restrained displeasure. She pursed her lips, took a deep breath, and put on that familiar smile again. Xiaoqing, she said softly, do you have some issue with me? I placed the empty cup on the table and looked up at her. No, not at all. Then why? She glanced at the coffee in the trash can, hesitating. I don't drink coffee anymore, I said. I quit. She stared at me, something shifting in her eyes. Quit? You were drinking it yesterday, and today you say you quit. She didn't believe it herself. But she didn't ask further, she just smiled and said, all right then, I won't bring you any from now on. Then she turned around, went back to her bed, sat down, and opened a book to read. Watching her back, I suddenly felt a bit of admiration for her composure and ability to keep her cool. Even after being publicly humiliated like that, she could still smile and smooth things over. If someone like that wasn't up to no good, they'd definitely go far in the future. What a shame. I have a class this morning. The professor for this ancient literature course is surnamed Zhou, in his 50s, wearing a pair of reading glasses while teaching. He likes to let his thoughts roam freely, moving from the Book of Songs to Dream of the Red Chamber, teaching whatever comes to mind. No one dares to skip his class because he takes attendance at the end of the semester, and anyone who skips can expect to fail. In my previous life, I didn't like him much, thinking his lectures were too disorganized and lacked focus. Later, when I was wandering the streets, I once passed by a bookstore and saw a book in the window with his name printed on the cover. It turned out he had written a book, but by then, I could no longer afford it. Today, we're discussing love poems from the Book of Songs. Professor Zhou stood at the podium, slowly flipping through his lecture notes. Everyone can recite Guanju, right? Guanguanju Jiu. In the river islets, a fair maiden, a gentleman's good match. But do you know what this poem is really about? Someone in the audience whispered softly, falling in love. Professor Zhou adjusted his glasses and glanced in that direction. Falling in love, yes and no. When you read Guanju, you see love, but what I see is propriety. He turned around and wrote 2 words on the blackboard, ritual and morality. Guanju is the opening poem of the Book of Songs. Why this one in particular? Because the ancients believed that husband and wife are the foundation of human relationships. Only by upholding the proper way of marriage can the way of the world be set right. So, while this poem appears to be about love, it's actually about how to love in accordance with ritual and propriety, a fair maiden, a gentleman's good match. What does fair mean? It's not about a good figure but a beautiful heart, good character. What does gentleman mean? It's not about being handsome but about understanding propriety and having good manners. How many of you think about these things when you fall in love nowadays? The classroom fell silent, and Professor Joe continued. So, reading the Book of Songs isn't just about the literal meaning, you have to read what's behind the words, the historical context, social customs, the author's intent, the evolution of the text. Only when you've thoroughly understood all of these can you truly say you've grasped it. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. Can anyone give an example, from any piece in the Book of Songs? And talk about what you've read behind the words. No one raised their hand. This was perfectly normal. Freshmen had only been in school for 2 months. Being able to memorize the text was already impressive. Who had the ability to read beyond it? Professor Joe waited a few seconds and was about to speak when I raised my hand. He looked at me, slightly surprised. Go ahead, the student. I stood up. Mang. Professor Joe raised an eyebrow. Go on. I took a deep breath. The words I had recalled countless times on the streets flashing through my mind. Mang tells the story of a woman being abandoned. On the surface, it's a condemnation of a heartless man, but behind it, it's actually about the oppression of women under the marriage system of that time. And continue. In the poem, it says, it's not that I'm delaying the date, but you have no proper matchmaker. The woman blames the man for not having a good matchmaker, which shows that marriage at the time had to go through a matchmaker, otherwise, it wasn't in accordance with propriety. But later, when the man brings betrothal gifts to propose, the woman agrees, even saying, don't be angry, let's set the wedding for autumn. She's afraid he'll get angry and quickly sets the wedding date. What does this mean? It means that even though the woman knows the rules of propriety, she doesn't have the ability to truly abide by them. She loves this man, so she can only compromise. Professor Joe didn't speak, just looked at me. After marriage, the woman for 3 years. I was a wife. No labor was spared, early to rise, late to rest. No morning was idle. She worked hard to manage the household, rising early and sleeping late. But what did she get in return? It was once his wishes were fulfilled, he turned to violence. The man's violence. She wanted to resist, but her brothers didn't understand. They laughed at her. Not only did they not help her, they mocked her, because once she was married, she belonged to another family. Her natal family couldn't interfere, nor did they want to. In the end, she says, turning back, not thinking, let it be, that's all, forget it, let it be. Many people read this and think she's resigned to her fate, but I don't think so. She's seen things clearly. She sees that under the system, no matter how much she struggles, it's useless. She can't change the system, so she can only change her own mindset. This isn't resignation, it's clarity. I finished speaking, and the classroom was so quiet you could hear the wind outside the window. Professor Joe looked at me, his eyes bright behind his glasses. What's your name? Wang Xiaoqing. He nodded. Have you read the entire Book of Songs? I've read parts of it. I smiled. What you just said doesn't sound like something someone who's only read parts of it could say. Sit down. I sat down, and Suqin beside me was looking at me with an expression as complicated as a spilled paint palette. I ignored her. Professor Joe continued the lecture, but as he spoke, he kept glancing in my direction. When class ended, he packed up his lecture notes and suddenly called out to me, Wang Xiaoqing, stay for a moment. I stood up and walked toward the podium under the gaze of the entire class. Suqin also stood up, wanting to say something, but I didn't give her the chance and walked away directly. Professor Joe waited for me to approach, tucked his lecture notes under his arm, and asked, are you interested in the Book of Songs? Yes. Then, would you be interested in joining a reading group? It's a gathering of the graduate students I mentor every Friday afternoon to discuss some classics. Undergraduates rarely participate, but if you'd like to come, we can make an exception. I was taken aback. A reading group. In my past life, I had never heard of such a thing, or rather, in my past life, such opportunities never came my way. Is that okay? I asked. If I say it's okay, then it's okay. He paused. But there's one condition. For the next discussion, prepare a presentation. Just elaborate on what you said earlier, but go a bit deeper. Can you do that? I nodded. All right, he said, walking away. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, at the small conference room in the College of Liberal Arts. Don't be late. I watched his back disappear through the doorway, standing there, suddenly feeling like crying, not because I was moved, but because I finally understood one thing. In my past life, it wasn't that I had no opportunities. It was that I simply didn't know what opportunities looked like. They were the most Ordinary coats, hiding in the most inconspicuous corners. If you don't actively seek them out, they will never come looking for you. Xiaoqing. Suqin ran over from behind, grabbing my arm. What did Professor Zhou want with you? I snapped back to reality and looked at her. Her eyes were curved, smiling sweetly and innocently. Nothing much, I said. He just asked if I had read the Book of Songs. Have you read it? A little. You're amazing, she said, shaking my arm. I couldn't understand that poem at all, and I was stunned by what you said earlier. How do you know so much? I smiled at her. Learned it in a dream. She punched me lightly. There you go again. We walked back to the dorm together. Along the way, she chattered nonstop about how difficult today's class was, how strict Professor Zhou was, and how nervous she was when I stood up earlier. I listened, occasionally responding, but my mind was elsewhere. Friday's reading group. Who will be there? Graduate students, probably some teachers too. They discuss classics, and there must be a lot of things I don't know. I need to learn, to catch up on what I missed in my past life as quickly as possible. And one more thing, I remember a senior from my past life, 2 years ahead of us, who later became a legend in the industry. He was from the College of Liberal Arts, and I think he also participated in some reading group. I can't remember the exact details, but I know he wrote several books after graduation, each selling well. And he even appeared on TV. What was his name? Chin, something, I can't recall. Xiaoqing. Suqin suddenly stopped. You're really strange today. I stopped too and looked at her. How am I strange? It's just, she tilted her head, as if trying to find the right words. You never used to show off like this before. Today in class, so many people didn't raise their hands, but you did. Weren't you afraid of embarrassing yourself if you said something wrong? I looked at her. Her eyes held concern, worry, and a hint of probing. There's nothing to be afraid of, I said. Saying something wrong won't kill you. She paused for a moment, then laughed. True. We continued walking. I had no classes in the afternoon, so I went to the library. On the 4th floor, there's an ancient texts reading room filled with old, yellowed books that give off a musty smell as soon as you open them. In my past life, I never set foot in here, thinking it had nothing to do with me, but now it's different. I found copies of the Book of Songs, picked out a few of the more famous ones, and sat down in a corner to flip through them one by one. Outside the window, the autumn sunlight was yellow and warm, shining on the leaves. As I read, I took notes, and as I took notes, I wondered, what was that senior's name again? I think his surname was Chen, and his name had the character for Moon in it, or maybe his courtesy name was Moon. I can't quite remember, but I remember what he looked like in my past life. I saw him once on TV. He was wearing a white shirt and glasses, speaking slowly and elegantly, with great poise. The topic of that interview seemed to be about the modern value of traditional culture. He said a lot, and though I only half understood it, one sentence stuck with me. He said, reading isn't about being better than others, it's about making yourself unafraid. At the time, I was lying under a bridge, listening to his voice coming from my phone, and suddenly tears started streaming down my face. I wasn't unafraid, I was terrified. I was afraid of tomorrow, afraid of going hungry, afraid my mother would never wake up again. I was afraid of so many things, so many that I couldn't even cry. But now it's different. Now I'm reading too, not to be better than others, but to make myself unafraid. In the evening, as I was leaving the library, my phone rang. It was Suqin. Xiaoqing, where are you? The library. Have you eaten? I'll bring you something. No need, I'll go myself. All right then, I'll wait for you in the cafeteria. After hanging up, I stood at the library entrance, watching the sky slowly darken. The sunset dyed the clouds orange-red, patch by patch, like burnt paper ash. I remembered the last day of my past life, when my mother closed her eyes in a dusk just like this. She grabbed my hand and said she was cold, asking me to hold her tight. I held her body as it grew colder and colder, until night fell, until dawn broke, until someone chased us away. I'll never forget the color of that dusk. My phone rang again. This time it wasn't a phone call, but a WeChat message, sent from an unfamiliar number. Hello, classmate Wang Xiaoqing. I'm Qinyu, a first-year graduate student in the College of Liberal Arts. Professor Zhou gave me your WeChat and said you should join the reading group chat. Could you please accept the friend request? Qinyu. Looking at this name, my mind exploded with a loud buzz. It was him. That legendary senior who would later become a legend, the one who said, "We read so we won't be afraid." I clicked on his profile picture, which was the cover of a book, then opened his moments. There weren't many posts. The latest one was from yesterday. A new semester, a new start. Hope to read a few more good books this term. I accepted the friend request, and he immediately added me to a group chat. The group was called Read Something Good. There were over a dozen people inside. He tagged everyone one by one. This is our new junior, Wang Xiaoqing. She'll be sharing with us this Friday, welcome, below. A flurry of welcome stickers popped up. I looked at those profile pictures, those names, those unfamiliar faces. In my past life, I didn't need to know any of them. In this life, they had all become my people. On the way back to the dorm, I sent Suchin a message. Not eating, you guys go ahead. She replied instantly. What's wrong? Not feeling well. I replied, no, just not very hungry. She sent a worried sticker. Then come back early, I'll bring you some fruit. I didn't reply. Just slipped my phone into my pocket. I walked slowly as the campus lights gradually turned on, one by one, illuminating the path clearly. I passed the teaching building, the cafeteria, and the old locust tree said to be over 100 years old. When I reached the dormitory building, I stopped and looked up at the 5th floor. Our window was lit, the curtains not fully drawn, and I could see a figure moving inside. That was Suchin. She was probably waiting for me to return, waiting to ask me where I went today, who I met, and what I did. Standing downstairs, staring at that window, I suddenly remembered something. In my past life, I also lived in this dorm, in this very room with this same window, but after I was expelled, I came back to pack my things, and Suchin helped me. She cried while folding my clothes, saying she couldn't bear to see me go. I believed her, even said we'd keep in touch, later. I found out that as soon as I left, she moved into my bed, the one by the window. Warm in winter and cool in summer, she had wanted it all along. What a perfect arrangement. She took everything from me, and in the end, even my place to sleep had to be given to her. I took a deep breath and stepped into the building. When I pushed open the dorm room door, Suchin was sitting on my bed, holding my notebook. Seeing me come in, she froze for a moment, then smiled and put the notebook down. You're back. I was waiting for you. I was just looking at what you wrote in your notes. Trying to learn something, I walked over, picked up the notebook, and flipped through it. It wasn't where I had left it. After looking through it, I asked her, did you read it? The smile on her face stiffened for a second before returning naturally. Not much. Just flipped through it casually. Your notes are really good. Let me borrow them to make a copy sometime. Okay. I locked the notebook in the drawer. He looked at the lock, and his expression changed, turning to Xiaoqing. Her voice was a bit tense. What are you locking? Afraid I'll see it. I turned to look at him. Not afraid you'll see it, I said. I'm afraid you'll lose it for me. She stood up and walked over to me, staring into my eyes. Xiaoqing. Her voice was very low. Tell me the truth. Have I offended you in some way? I looked at her too. Her eyes were big and bright, now filled with grievance and confusion. If it were in my past life, I would have panicked immediately, desperately explaining, saying no, you've always been the best to me. How could I possibly have any issues with you? But now, I just looked at her, watching as she used those eyes to tell me she was innocent, kind, and misunderstood. No, I said, you haven't offended me. Then why? He pointed at the lock on the drawer. I just wanted to lock it, I said. Can't I lock my own things? He stared at me for several seconds without speaking. Then he smiled. That smile was different from before. Not aggrieved, not confused, but a bit cold. Fine. He said, of course you can. Your own things, lock them if you want. He turned and went back to his bedside, pulled the curtains shut, and turned on the desk lamp. I looked at the tightly drawn curtains and suddenly felt a bit amused. Can't handle it already. This is just the beginning. I picked up the wash basin and went to the washroom to freshen up. No one was in the washroom, and the water from the faucet flowed noisily. As I washed my face, my mind wandered back to what had just happened. Why did he go through my notebook? Was it to see what I was studying, or to find some kind of leverage? Probably the latter. He was starting to panic. My behavior today made him feel like things were getting out of control. That Wang Xiaoqing, whom he could easily manipulate, suddenly became less easy to handle. He needed to figure out what was happening, to find a new way to deal with me. So he went through my notebook. So he asked if he had offended me. So he looked at me with those aggrieved eyes, waiting for me to soften, waiting for me to drop my defenses on my own. What a shame. I turned off the faucet, dried my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. 18 years old, just washed my face, skin still a little flushed, eyes bright. This face was so much better than the sallow, gaunt one from my past life. I smiled with this lifetime's face. Back in the dorm, the lights were already off. A faint glow seeped through Suchin's bed curtain. She was probably still on her phone. I didn't turn on the light. Feeling my way to bed in the dark, moonlight from outside the window streamed in, falling on that pot of pothos. I turned my head and looked at the plant. The day I watered it with coffee, I thought it was done for, but now, looking again, a tiny patch of tender green had truly sprouted among the yellow leaves, small, delicate, definitely alive. I stared at those little green sprouts and suddenly remembered something. When did this plant die in my past life? It seemed to be during the second semester of freshman year. By then, I was already completely under Suchin's care, drinking the coffee she brought every day, listening to her sweet words, thinking how lucky I was to have met such a good roommate. One day, I noticed the plant had died and was quite upset. Suchin comforted me, saying, "It's okay, I'll go with you to buy a new one later." But we never did. Later, I threw it away. I reached out and touched the plant's leaves through the windowsill, cool, soft, but definitely alive. In this life, I won't throw it away, and I won't let it die. A 3. Who's the real cheat? The next few days were calm and uneventful. Suchin was still the same Suchin, smiling and talking to me every day, saving me a seat, reminding me to turn in assignments. She stopped bringing that cup of coffee, but occasionally she'd bring back an apple or yogurt from the cafeteria, place it on my desk, and say she bought it on a whim and couldn't finish it. I accepted it all and ate it right in front of her. She watched me eat, the complexity in her eyes growing thicker, but I didn't care. I wanted her to see that I'd take all her little favors, but the door in my heart was already welded shut. On Thursday night after lights out, I lay in bed and heard movement from the opposite bunk, very faint, like something being opened and closed. I turned over and peeked through the curtain gap. A dim light seeped through Suchin's bed curtain, probably from her phone screen. The light flickered a few times, then went out. A few minutes later, I heard her footsteps, very light, heading toward the door. She opened it and went out. I glanced at the time, 1:20 a.m. Where could he be going at this hour? I lay still, continuing to wait. About 10 minutes later, the door opened again, and footsteps returned to the bed. The light inside the bed curtain flickered on once more, then went out, and everything fell silent again. I closed my eyes, making a mental note of this incident. The next day was Friday, and there was a reading group at 3 in the afternoon. I left the dormitory at 2. Suchin wasn't there when I left. Her books were spread out on the table, but she was nowhere to be seen. I didn't ask and just left. The small conference room in the College of Liberal Arts was on the 3rd floor of the IFU building. It wasn't large, just a long table, about a dozen chairs, and a few pots of potholes on the windowsill. When I arrived, someone was already there. A bespectacled boy was sitting by the window, reading a book. Hearing the door open, he looked up. Wang Xiaoqing. He stood up and smiled. I'm Chinyu. It was that face, white shirt, glasses, a gentle smile. In my past life, I had seen him once on TV, and now he was standing right in front of me, alive. I nodded. Hello, senior. No need to be so formal. Have a seat. He gestured to a chair. Professor Zhou isn't here yet, so take a seat. The others will be here soon. I sat down and looked around. On the wall of the room hung a whiteboard with a few lines written on it in Chinyu's handwriting, female images in the Book of Songs, from Guanju to Meng. Below were several key points. I glanced at them, all perspectives I had never considered before. It was a summary of last week's discussion. Chinyu followed my gaze. It's your turn this week. What are you planning to talk about? Meng, I said, but I want to approach it from a different angle. What angle? Looking at women's survival struggles from the perspective of the marriage system. He raised an eyebrow. That's a good angle. Do you have any materials? Yes. I pulled the notebook out of my backpack. I had looked up some information in the library over the past few days, but it might not be enough. He took it, flipped through it, looked up at me, and his expression seemed a little different. Did you look all of this up? It's not easy for a freshman to find this much. He handed the notebook back to me, leaned back in his chair, and smiled. Interesting. I didn't know what he meant by interesting, and I didn't ask. The others arrived one after another. Some were second-year graduate students, some were third-year. There was also one who looked even younger than me. I asked and found out she was a sophomore, also specially approved by Professor Zhou to join. Professor Zhou arrived last, carrying that ever-present black briefcase. He sat down in the main seat, adjusted his glasses, and looked at me. Let's begin. I stood up. It would be a lie to say I wasn't nervous. Among those present, I was the youngest, the least well-read, yet I had experienced the most, but those things couldn't be shared. All I could talk about was Meng, that woman abandoned thousands of years ago. Today, I want to talk about the female self-awakening in Meng. I opened my notebook and took a deep breath. Many people read Meng and see a resentful woman who was abandoned, but I don't think this woman is complaining. She's reflecting. She goes through the entire marriage from beginning to end. Not to vent her grievances, but to figure out one thing. Where did she go wrong? At the beginning of the poem, Meng looks simple and honest, holding cloth to trade for silk. He didn't come to trade for silk, he came to court me. The man came smiling, holding cloth, not really to trade for silk, but to pursue her. She saw through it but didn't expose him. Why? Because she liked him too. I saw you across the Qi River, all the way to Duanqiu. She saw him off a long way, across the river, all the way to Duanqiu. This wasn't just seeing someone off, It was reluctance. It's not that I'm delaying. You haven't found a proper matchmaker, she told him. It's not that I'm stalling. It's that you haven't arranged for a proper matchmaker. This sounds like a refusal, but in reality, she was giving him a way forward. She wanted to marry him, but it had to be proper, with a matchmaker, a formal wedding, later. When he came with betrothal gifts, she agreed. Don't be angry, let's set the wedding. For autumn, she was even afraid he'd get angry, so she quickly set the wedding date. At this step, she had already begun to compromise after marriage. For 3 years I was your wife, I toiled without rest, I rose early and went to bed late, never a morning did I idle. How exhausted she made herself, rising early and working late, doing every kind of labor, but what did she get in return, now that your heart is satisfied? You have become harsh and violent. Once he got what he wanted, he started beating her. And what about her brothers? My brothers do not understand, they only laugh at me. Not only did they not help her, they mocked her, because once she was married off, she belonged to someone else's family. Her natal family couldn't intervene, nor did they want to. In the end, she says, I will no longer think of the past. What's done is done, let it be, forget it, I won't think about it anymore. Let it be. Many people reading this feel she has resigned herself to fate, but I think she has awakened. She sees clearly that under the system, no matter how hard she tries, it's useless. She can't change the system, so she can only change her own mindset. This isn't resignation, it's awakening, a sober, helpless, yet the only way to survive kind of awakening. I finished speaking, and the room fell silent for a few seconds. Professor Joe was the first to speak. What do you think happened after she awakened? I thought for a moment. She'll survive, I said. She'll live on. With this clarity, in the future, when she encounters anything, she won't be so foolish anymore. She'll know that some people and some things aren't worth it. Professor Joe nodded and said nothing more. Others began asking questions, discussing, and debating. Some said I was overinterpreting, some said my perspective was novel, and some said my conclusion was too pessimistic. We should recognize the spirit of resistance among women in difficult situations. I listened, took notes, and occasionally responded. Chin, you didn't speak the whole time, just sat by the window, chin in hand, watching me. The discussion lasted over 2 hours. When it ended, Professor Joe stood up and patted my shoulder. Well done, he said. Continue next week. I was taken aback. How could I just do one session and then run? He smiled and said, go back and prepare for the next session on ancient style. I nodded, feeling a strange sensation welling up inside me, a sense of being recognized. I never had this feeling in my past life. During my year in college, I lived like a shadow, sitting in the corner during class, going straight back to the dorm after, never participating in any activities. It wasn't that I didn't want to, I was afraid. I feared being noticed, being talked about, not being good enough. Now it's different. What is there to fear after having died once? After leaving the meeting room, Chinyu caught up and walked beside me. Which dorm building do you live in? Building 15. That's perfect, I'll walk you back. We went downstairs together, walking across campus. The evening sunlight was soft, shining on the plane trees lining the road. Their leaves were a mix of yellow and green, rustling loudly in the wind. Have you read a lot of books before? He asked. No, just a bit over the past 2 years. 2 years, he glanced at me. You're a freshman this year. I read them in high school. I paused. Yes, high school. He nodded and didn't press further. When we reached the entrance of building 15, he stopped. See you Friday, see you Friday. I turned and headed into the building. As I reached the door, I heard him call out from behind, Wang Xiaoqing. I looked back. He stood in the sunset, his white shirt tinted a soft orange. Earlier, when you said that woman would survive after awakening, I think you're right. Surviving is more important than anything. I was taken aback for a moment, then nodded. He smiled, turned, and walked away. I stood there watching him go. Survive, yes, survive, live well. I turned and went upstairs, pushing open the dorm room door. Su Qing wasn't there. Her bed curtain was drawn, but her blanket wasn't folded, and her slippers were scattered messily on the floor. This wasn't like her. She was usually the neatest, keeping everything in perfect order, her blanket folded like a block of tofu. I walked to her bed and pulled back the curtain. A few books were spread out on the bed, along with an open notebook and a pen. The notebook was filled with densely packed writing. I glanced down. It was my handwriting. No, it was handwriting imitating mine. The characters looked exactly like mine, with straight horizontal and vertical strokes. Even the curvature of the hooks was identical, but the content wasn't mine. It was an essay about the Book of Songs, titled Marriage and Love Concepts in the Pre-Qin Period as Seen from Mang. I stood there staring at the essay, and something in my mind exploded. She had already started writing it. If this essay were published or submitted, who could prove it wasn't hers? Her handwriting was so similar to mine. Who could say for sure who copied whom? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. Don't panic. She writes hers, I write mine. As long as I publish or submit mine first, she'll be the one accused of plagiarism. The problem is timing. I don't know when she plans to submit it. If she's faster than me, I'll be labeled the plagiarist. I need to figure out her plan. I placed the notebook back in its original position, closed the curtain, and returned to sit on my own bed, my mind racing. In my past life, she framed me during exams, using cheat sheets, notes, public exposure. This time, has she changed her tactics, or is she preparing on multiple fronts? Both were possible. I needed evidence. My phone rang, a message from Xiaoqing, I'm at the library. I'll be back later, eat without me, I replied. Okay. Putting down my phone, I stared blankly out the window. The pot of pothoes had grown a few new leaves, tender and green, glowing in the sunset. The next day was Saturday, no classes. I woke up early, washed up, and sat at the desk to read. Suchin was still sleeping, her bed curtain drawn, occasionally turning over. Around 8 o'clock, her phone rang. She answered it, her voice groggy. Hello, yeah, got it, okay. After a while, she hung up. She pulled open the bed curtain, saw me sitting at the desk, and froze for a moment. You're up so early, couldn't sleep. She got out of bed, went to the washroom to freshen up, came back to change clothes and put on makeup, taking almost an hour. Before leaving, she glanced back at me. I won't be back for lunch, eat by yourself, okay? She left. I waited 5 minutes, making sure she wouldn't come back for anything. I stood up and walked to her bedside, pulling open the bed curtain. The notebook was still there, but its position had changed. Yesterday it was placed on top of the books. Today it was tucked under the pillow. I pulled out the notebook, flipped to the last page, and saw a few words written, finished by Friday. Friday, today is Saturday, 6 days until Friday. Enough time. I put the notebook back, returned to my desk, took out my own notebook, and started organizing the content discussed at yesterday's reading group. I needed to finish writing the paper as soon as possible, preferably by next Wednesday. Then show it to Professor Zhou to let him know I wrote it. That way, even if she submitted it first, there would be a timestamp. Halfway through writing, the door opened. Suchin's roommate Li Meng came in from outside. She was the other girl in our dorm, usually quiet and low-key. In my past life, I didn't have much of an impression of her, only knowing she later passed the civil service exam and returned to her hometown, Xiaoqing. She looked at me, her expression a bit strange. Suchin just left. She stood there for a while, as if wanting to say something but holding back. I kept writing, ignoring her. She walked to her bed and sat down, taking out her phone to play. After a while, she spoke again. Xiaoqing, are you and Suchin having a conflict? I stopped writing and looked up at her. Why do you ask? Nothing. Just, she paused. She's been asking me these past few days whether you're in the dorm, if you've gone to the library, who you're walking with. I thought you two had a fight. My heart stirred. What else did she ask? Just that. Li Meng shrugged. I didn't think much of it. It's good if you two aren't fighting. She kept playing with her phone, and I kept writing, but the tension in my mind had already tightened. Suchin was inquiring about my whereabouts. Why? Was she afraid I'd cause trouble, or was she looking for an opportunity to strike? Whichever it was, it meant one thing: she was getting anxious. When someone gets anxious, they make mistakes. What I needed to do was wait and watch for her to slip up. On Tuesday afternoon, I finished the first draft of my paper, over 5,000 words, starting from the female image in Meng to analyze the marriage system and social concepts of the pre-Qin period. I listed more than a dozen references, including books borrowed from the library and materials found online. I sent a message to Professor Zhou, asking if he could take a look. He replied instantly, send it over. I sent the document and waited. After nearly 2 hours, he replied, well written, but there are a few areas that need revision. Come to my office tomorrow afternoon, and I'll discuss it with you in person. Looking at that line of text, a weight lifted from my heart. With Professor Zhou overseeing it, this paper officially had its birth certificate, and Suchin wouldn't be able to copy it anymore. The next afternoon, I went to Professor Zhou's office. He had printed out my paper, densely annotated in red ink. He went through it point by point, explaining where the arguments were insufficient, where the materials lacked solidity, and where there were logical gaps. As I listened and took notes, I suddenly remembered my past life. What was I doing at this time in my past life? Probably lying in the dorm, scrolling through my phone, waiting for Suchin to bring me food, papers, and exams, never thinking about the future. Back then, I thought there was plenty of time. Now I know time is short, and every minute is valuable. When I left the office, it was already dark. I headed back to the dorm. As I reached the entrance, I saw a familiar figure standing at The door, Suchin, she spotted me and quickly walked over. Xiaoqing, where have you been? I've been looking for you for a while. Professor Zhou's office, I said. He was revising my paper. Her expression shifted slightly, but she quickly smiled again. Paper? What paper? The one on Meng from the last reading group. Professor Zhou asked me to write it into an article, saying it could be submitted to the school journal. Her smile froze for a moment. Right, when should I submit it? Submit it as soon as you finish revising. She nodded and didn't ask any more questions. We went upstairs together and returned to the dormitory together. She didn't speak the whole way, and neither did I. After the lights went out at night, I lay in bed and heard movement from the opposite bed. After a while, the door opened, and footsteps went out. 1:20 a.m., this time again. I lay still and continued to wait. This time she was gone for a long time. It was almost 2 o'clock when the door opened again. Footsteps returned to the bed, a light flickered inside the bed curtain, then went out. When I woke up the next morning, she was already up, sitting at the desk applying makeup in front of the mirror. Seeing that I was awake, she turned around and smiled. Awake, I bought breakfast. It's on the table. I sat up and glanced over. 2 steamed buns and a cup of soy milk on the table. Thank you, you're welcome, she continued with her makeup. By the way, Xiaoqing, can you show me your paper when you finish it? I'd like to learn from it too. I looked at her back, her face reflected in the mirror as she carefully drew her eyebrows, her expression focused. Sure, I said. I'll show it to you when it's done. She smiled and didn't say anything more. After breakfast, I went out to the library. When I reached downstairs, my phone rang. It was a message from Chinyu. I heard Professor Zhou is very satisfied with your paper. How do you know? He told me, at the noon reading group, you can share this paper with everyone. Okay, right. There's something I wanted to ask you. Have you been having any trouble lately? Do you need help? I stared at the message for a moment, taken aback. How did he know? I replied, saying it was nothing. He responded, all right then, let me know if you need anything. I slipped my phone into my pocket and headed toward the library. Halfway there, I suddenly stopped. Wait, how did he know I was in trouble? Unless he saw something or heard something. I stood there for a moment before continuing on my way. On Thursday night, I finished revising my paper, printed it out, and prepared to bring it to the book club on Friday. After the lights went out, I lay in bed, unable to sleep, waiting for 1:20 a.m. Sure enough, there was movement from the opposite bed again. Suchin got out of bed, opened the door, and left. I waited a few seconds, then got up, put on my jacket, and gently pulled the door open. The hallway was empty, with only the light from the emergency exit at the far end glowing. I walked over, pushed open the emergency door, and heard footsteps echoing in the stairwell. Heading downward, I followed, and the footsteps stopped on the 3rd floor, followed by the sound of a door opening. I reached the 3rd floor, pushed open the emergency door, and glanced outside. The hallway was empty, but one door was slowly closing. It was the door to the 3rd floor water room. I walked over and gently pushed it open. Inside, Suchin was alone. She stood by the window, her back to me, holding her phone and speaking in a low voice, though hushed. Her words were clear in the empty room. Don't worry, I've arranged everything. Yes, the exam is on Friday morning. I'll go in early. The note is already written. I've been practicing my handwriting all semester. No one will be able to tell. When the time comes, it'll look like she brought it herself, and she won't be able to explain it. Yes, I've spoken to Li Meng too. She'll back me up. As for the guaranteed admission spot, we can discuss it after this is over. She hung up the phone, turned around, and saw me standing in the doorway. Her face instantly turned pale. Xiaoqing, I looked at her. The note is ready. I asked, you've been practicing your handwriting all semester, for a guaranteed admission spot. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. I turned and walked out, and she rushed after me, grabbing my arm. Xiaoqing, let me explain. I shook off her hand and continued walking forward, but she caught up again, blocking my way. Xiaoqing, aren't we friends? Can't you just, friends? I stopped and looked at her. You call this friendship? Her face flushed, then paled, then flushed again. I can explain. No need, I said. I heard everything clearly. I walked around her and continued on my way. After a few steps, I stopped and looked back at her. By the way, about that note you mentioned, I suggest you go back and check if it's still there. Her face turned even paler. What do you mean? I didn't answer and went straight upstairs to the dormitory. I lay back on the bed, closed my eyes, and felt my heart racing, but I wasn't afraid. Finally, after waiting so long, she had admitted it herself. On Friday morning, the midterm exam was held on the 3rd floor of the teaching building. Our class of 30 students was split into 2 classrooms, and Suchin and I weren't in the same one, which saved a lot of trouble. Before entering the exam room, she stood in the hallway watching me, her eyes red as if she'd been crying. I ignored her and went straight into the exam room. When the test papers were handed out, I glanced over them. I knew all the answers, and started writing. Halfway through, I suddenly heard someone stand up behind me. It was the invigilator walking over to a girl and asking her to open her pencil case. The girl panicked, her voice trembling. "Teacher, what's wrong? Someone reported you for smuggling notes." The entire exam room fell silent. The girl's pencil case was opened, and a neatly folded note fell out. Unfolded, it was covered in dense formulas. The invigilator glanced at it and asked her, "Is this yours?" "No, I don't know. How could this be in my pencil case?" Her voice was shrill, on the verge of tears. I kept writing without looking back. After the exam, a crowd had gathered in the hallway. The girl was crouched in a corner crying, with some people comforting her and others whispering. I walked over and saw her face. It was Li Meng, Su Qin's roommate, the one who had promised to testify for Su Qin. She looked up and saw me, her eyes brimming with hatred. I ignored her and kept walking. At the stairwell, I saw Su Qin standing there. She looked at me, her face as pale as paper. I walked over and stood in front of her. "Is the note still there?" I asked. Her lips trembled. "How did you know?" "I know a lot of things," I said. "Like 1:20 a.m., the third-floor water room, the guaranteed admission spot." Her legs gave way, and she had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. "What do you want?" I thought about it. "I don't want anything," I said. "I just wanted to let you know that I'm aware of all your tricks, so you'd better stay away from me and stop thinking about that guaranteed admission spot. Otherwise, I can hand that recording over to the department at any time." "Recording?" "Yes, recording." I smiled, turned around, and walked away. When I reached downstairs, the sunlight felt warm on my body. I looked up at the sky. It was a beautiful day, blue and cloudless. My phone rang. It was a message from Professor Zhou. "Your paper passed. The school journal said it'll be published in the next issue. Congratulations." I replied, "Thank you, Professor Zhou." Another message came, this time from Chinyu. "How did the exam go?" I replied, "Not bad." He replied, "That's good. See you on Friday." Looking at the last 3 words he sent, I suddenly remembered what he said that day. Staying alive is more important than anything. Yes, staying alive, living well. I put away my phone and walked back to the dorm. When I reached the building, I looked up at the window on the 5th floor. The pot of pothos was on the windowsill, its leaves lush and green, much larger than before. Looking at that plant, I suddenly smiled. For Mom, Dad, the company can't be sold. The incident of Li Meng being caught cheating on the spot spread throughout the department for 3 days. It was said she cried all afternoon, insisting that the note wasn't hers and that someone had framed her. But how could she explain the fact that the proctor found it in her pencil case right then and there? The academic affairs office called her in for a talk, asking if she had offended anyone recently or if she had any enemies. She said no, that there was nothing, but she didn't mention Su Qin. Su Qin never said a word about it from start to finish. I was sitting in the cafeteria eating when I heard the news. Across from me was Su Qin, head bowed, shoveling rice into her mouth bite by bite, her face sallow, the dark circles under her eyes impossible to hide. She hadn't slept well for 3 days, I knew, because every night at exactly 1:20 a.m., I would open my eyes on time, listening to the sounds from the opposite bed. She was tossing and turning, back and forth, the bed frame creaking and groaning, all the way until dawn. "Xiaoqing," she suddenly spoke, her voice hoarse. "Did you really record it that night?" I picked up a bite of food with my chopsticks, chewed it slowly, and swallowed. "What do you think?" She fell silent again, took a few more bites of rice, then put down her chopsticks and stood up. "I'm heading back first." I watched her figure walk away and continued eating. After finishing my meal and returning to the dorm, I pushed open the door and saw Su Qin sitting on my bed, holding that pot of pothos, staring at it. Hearing the door, she looked up. "This plant," her voice sounded a bit distant. "I remember it was almost dead before. How did it come back to life?" I walked over, took the pot from her hands, and placed it back on the windowsill. "Maybe because I watered it with coffee." She froze. "Coffee?" I wiped away the water stains under the pot. "Caffeine is poison to plants. Usually, they die if you water them with it, but this one is different. It survived." I turned to look at her. "Some things you think you can kill, but you actually can't." Her face paled for a moment, and she fell silent. After a long while, she suddenly spoke again, her voice low. "Xiaoqing, can we go back to how we used to be?" I looked at her. She sat there, hands twisted together, eyes red, looking utterly pitiful. In my past life, I would have softened. I would have wondered if she really had her reasons, if I had misunderstood her. But now, I just found it laughable. "How we used to be." I walked up to her, looking down at her from above. "You mean, you brought me coffee every day?" I was so touched I could die. "And then you slipped cheat sheets into my pencil case." I got Expelled. My family fell apart. That, she jerked her head up, her eyes filled with shock. How do I know? I smiled. I know a lot more than that. For example, how did you get that guaranteed admission spot? Who are you calling every day at 1:20 a.m. in the washroom? Why did Li Meng take the fall for everything? And what did you promise her in return? Her face turned pale, bit by bit, as white as paper. Don't talk nonsense, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't do anything, Li Meng's situation has nothing to do with me. I bent down, leaning close to her face. Suchin, listen carefully. I have that recording, and I can play it for you anytime you want to hear it. But for now, get the hell away from me. Don't let me see you sitting on my bed again. Don't touch my things, and don't talk to me. Understood? Tears fell from her eyes, rolling down her cheeks one by one. Xiaoqing, I'll really go. She stood up, covered her face, and ran out. I stood by the window, watching as the sky outside grew overcast, the clouds thick and heavy, as if rain was about to fall. My phone rang. It was my mom calling. Ching. Her voice sounded a bit tense. Can you come home this week? My heart sank. What's wrong? Nothing major. It's just that your dad recently discussed a project with a big boss who said he wants to invest in our company. I don't really understand these things, but I can't help feeling uneasy. Come back and help me take a look at the big boss's investment proposal. Something in my mind suddenly exploded. In my previous life, there was also a big boss who came to see my dad around this time. My dad had just taken on a major project and was struggling with cash flow. The boss offered to invest, on the condition that my dad transfer half of the company's shares to him. My dad believed him and signed the contract. It turned out the boss was a fraud, using the company as a front for money laundering. In the end, when the truth came out, my dad was arrested and imprisoned for 6 months, and the company collapsed. It was this incident, this person. Mom, I tried to keep my voice steady. I'll be back tomorrow, I said before hanging up. I stood by the window, looking at the pot of pothos. Its leaves were lush and green, more than twice the size they were when I first came back to life. I reached out and touched the largest leaf. This time, I won't let anyone touch my family. Early the next morning, I boarded the train home. During the 3-hour journey, I kept thinking about that person. His surname was Lu Jiangwo. He claimed to be in real estate, but in reality, he was the owner of a shell company, specializing in scamming small business owners. My dad was ruined by him. This time, I won't let him get anywhere near my family. When the train arrived, my mom was waiting at the exit. The moment I saw her, I froze. She stood there, wearing a faded blue jacket, her hair messy, a tired smile on her face. Compared to the last few years of my previous life, she looked much younger now. Her hair was still black, and there weren't as many wrinkles on her face, but I could see it in her eyes right away, that same look from my past life, filled with worry, exhaustion, and a weariness that could never be suppressed. She waved at me, and I quickly walked over, giving her a tight hug. She froze for a moment, then patted my back with a smile. Silly child. Still acting spoiled. I didn't say a word, burying my face in her shoulder and taking a deep breath. It was that familiar scent of hers, laundry detergent mixed with kitchen fumes and a hint of sweat. The last time I smelled this scent in my past life was under a bridge, when she could no longer smell anything at all. Mom, I let go of her, blinking hard. Let's go home. On the way back, I asked her about that Mr. Lu, saying a friend had introduced him. My mom spoke while riding her bike. He's in real estate, has several projects in hand, and wants to partner with a local company. Your dad recently took on a project, but there's a bit of a funding gap. He said he could invest, on the condition that he takes a 51% stake. 51%, that meant control. My dad's company, built with a lifetime of hard work, would become someone else's in an instant. What does dad think? You know your dad, when it comes to business, he gets carried away, thinking it's an opportunity. My mom sighed. I don't feel right about it, but I can't quite put my finger on why. You've been studying in the city, you've seen more of the world. Help me talk some sense into him. I nodded, saying nothing more. By the time we got home, it was already dark. My dad was sitting in the living room, a document spread out on the coffee table. He was wearing his reading glasses, going over it word by word. Hearing the door open, he looked up and froze when he saw me. Ching, what are you doing back? Mom asked me to come back. I changed my shoes and walked in. Dad, let me see that document. He handed it to me, a hint of pride on his face. Your dad has really met a benefactor this time, that Mr. Lu. He's truly a man of great ability. You have no idea. He has several projects in the provincial capital. I took the document and flipped through it page by page. It was exactly the same as the one I'd seen in my past life. Investment agreement, equity transfer. Additional clauses. The clauses hid traps. The transfer concealed tricks. The words were dense and intricate, impossible for an ordinary person to spot the issues. But I knew, because after my dad signed it in my past life, those traps exploded one by one, shattering our family to pieces. Dad, I put down the document. How many times have you met this Mr. Liu? 3 or 4 times. Why, have you ever visited his company in person? My dad paused for a moment. No, I haven't. Such a big boss. Would he really deceive our small company? I looked at him sitting there, his hair already graying, the wrinkles on his face slightly shallower than in my memory, but that stubborn streak hadn't changed at all. In my past life, he trusted people just like this, trusted friends, trusted partners, trusted Mr. Liu. In the end, his friends betrayed him, his partners ran off, and Mr. Liu used his company for money laundering, leaving him to take the fall. Dad, I sat down across from him. Listen to me, there's something wrong with this Mr. Liu. His brow furrowed. What's wrong? What do you, a kid, know about it? I don't understand business, I said, but I know how to read people. I opened the document and pointed to one of the clauses for him to see. This clause says, Party B has the right to supervise and manage Party A's finances during the cooperation period. What does supervise and manage mean? It means he can check your accounts whenever he wants and control how you spend money. 51% of the shares, plus financial oversight. Who really owns this company? My dad leaned in to take a look, and his expression shifted slightly. This should be a standard clause. No, it's not, I said. This is a controlling clause. He takes 51% of your shares, then takes financial oversight, and you, as the legal representative, become a figurehead. From then on, you won't be able to control anything he does. If he takes out loans in the company's name, you'll have to repay them. If he uses the company as collateral, you'll be responsible. If he does something illegal, you'll be the first one arrested. My dad fell silent. My mom whispered from the side, I told you there was something wrong, but you wouldn't listen. My dad shot her a glare but didn't argue. I flipped to the back of the document and pointed to another clause, and there's this additional clause, Clause 4, Party A must, within 30 days of signing this agreement, mortgage a piece of land under the company's name to a bank designated by Party B. This isn't an investment, it's targeting our family's land. My dad's expression completely changed. That land was left by my grandparents, on the outskirts of the city. It's not big, but the location is good. A few years ago, someone offered $2 million for it, but my dad couldn't bring himself to sell. No, Mr. Liu's investment is just a front. What he really wants is that land. He told me he wanted to expand the business and needed funds for cash flow. Expand the business by mortgaging your land, I said. If he really had the money, why wouldn't he use his own assets as collateral? My dad sat there, not saying a word for a long time. I knew what he was thinking. He wasn't stupid, he just wanted too badly to grow the company, too eager to see something that looked like an opportunity. That's how it was in my past life. He took one wrong step, and every step after that went wrong, dragging the whole family into a pit. But not this time, Dad. I closed the file. If you really want to find an investor, I'll go with you to check everything out. To the business registry, the tax office, to see his company, to ask about his projects. Signing without checking anything thoroughly isn't doing business, it's handing your neck to someone else. My dad looked up at me, his expression complicated. When did you learn all this? I smiled. People who've been burned always learn their lesson. My mom stood up and said she was going to cook. My dad leaned back on the sofa, took off his reading glasses, and rubbed his eyes, watching him. I suddenly felt a pang of sadness. He was getting old. In this life, he was younger than in my past life, but that same weariness was there for this family. For me, he had struggled his whole life, only to end up with nothing and even take the blame for others. This time, I won't let anyone touch him. During dinner, my dad didn't say much. My mom kept putting food in my bowl, saying I'd lost weight, that the school food wasn't good, that I should call ahead next time I came home so she could make me something delicious. I ate and responded, but my mind was elsewhere. Liu Jiangwo didn't succeed this time, and he won't just let it go. He'll definitely find another way, another excuse. I need to make my dad see things clearly once and for all. Dad, I put down my chopsticks. How has your company been doing lately? He was taken aback, not expecting me to ask. It's okay, but collections are slow, and funds are a bit tight. Have you thought about transitioning in the future? Transition to what? I thought for a moment, organizing my words. Our teacher mentioned that many traditional industries are moving online these days. For example, in construction, you could create a platform that integrates design, construction, and materials, or in trade, you could start an e-commerce business, dealing directly with customers without going through middlemen. My dad looked at me, his expression a bit complicated. Did your teacher really talk about all this? He fell silent for a while, then suddenly smiled. Well, going to college really changes you. These are Things I don't understand, but you're talking about them like an expert. I smiled too. I just learned about it, so I might not be entirely right. Yes, he said, you're right. I really should think about the future. After dinner, I helped my mom clean up. She was washing dishes at the sink while I dried them beside her. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then, she suddenly spoke up, Ching Ching. Is there something going on with you this time you came back? My heart skipped a beat. No, nothing, I just came back to see you. She turned to look at me. Don't lie to me. What you said to your dad just now doesn't sound like something you came up with on the spot. Did something happen at school? I looked at her, under the light. Her face was soft like an old piece of cloth, her eyes filled with worry, concern, and something else I couldn't quite understand. I remembered my past life. She had looked at me the same way back then, at that time. I had already been expelled and was hiding at home, too. Afraid to go out, she never said a word, just made meals every day, brought them to my room door, knocked, and walked away. Later, she fell ill, had no money for treatment, and never told me, and then she was gone. Mom, I put down the bowl in my hands and hugged her. I'm fine, really, I just missed you. She was stunned for a moment, then gently patted my back. Silly child, if you miss me, just come home, I'll make you something delicious. I buried my face in her shoulder, squeezing my eyes shut tightly, but the tears still flowed out. That night, I slept in my old room. The bed was still the same bed, the quilt was still the same quilt, even the pillow was in the same spot. Posters from my high school days were still stuck on the wall, and the desk lamp I used to use sat on the desk. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling when my phone rang. It was a message from Chinyu. I heard you went home. Yeah, everything okay at home? It's fine, just came back to visit. He sent a head-patting emoji. That's good. At noon, during the reading club, I looked at those words and suddenly remembered something. Senior, I typed. Last time you asked if I was in trouble, how did you know? After a while, he replied, because every time you come to the reading club, it's like you're going into battle. That kind of fire in your eyes, that sharpness in your words, it doesn't come from reading books, it comes from being worn down by something. I stared at those words, stunned. Fire in my eyes, I hadn't even realized it myself. He sent another message, get some rest early, it's good that everything's fine at home. I replied with an okay, put down my phone, and looked out the window where moonlight was streaming in, falling on the floor. I lay there for a while and suddenly thought of that pot of pothoes. I wonder how it's doing now. It must have grown a few new leaves. Right, early the next morning, my dad went out. Before leaving, he told me he was going to talk to Mr. Liu. My heart tightened, but before I could say anything, he was already gone. My mom, standing nearby, said, don't worry, your dad knows what he's doing. I nodded, but my mind was still in turmoil. At noon, my dad came back. As soon as he walked in, he smiled at me. Ching Ching, Dad listened to you. I didn't sign that contract. The stone in my heart finally dropped. What about Mr. Liu? He left, my dad said, sitting on the sofa and letting out a long sigh. Today, I went to tell him I wouldn't sign the contract for now and that I needed more time to think. His face changed immediately. He said, Oldly, don't you trust me? I said, it's not about trust, I just want to think it over. He tried to persuade me for a long time, but when he saw I wouldn't budge, he finally stood up and left. I nodded. He'll be back. My dad looked at me. How do you know? Because he's got his eye on our land. I said, that land is valuable. He won't let it go easily. He'll definitely find some excuse to get close to you again these next few days. You need to be careful. My dad was silent for a moment, then nodded. All right, I'll listen to you. That afternoon, I went shopping with my mom. She was reluctant to spend money. Passing by the mall entrance, she'd glance inside, then say, let's not buy anything, let's not buy anything. I dragged her in anyway and bought her a new coat, light gray. She looked really good in it. She kept looking at herself in the mirror, muttering, too expensive, but her face was smiling like a flower. I watched her smile and smiled myself. In her last few years, she never even bought a new piece of clothing, wearing old clothes from before, still wearing them even when they were washed white. Back then, I was immature and even thought her clothes were tacky, unwilling to go out with her. Thinking about it now, I want to slap myself twice. Mom, I linked arms with her. I'll come back every month from now on to go shopping with you. She patted my hand. Good. That evening, my dad made a good meal. Braised pork, sweet and sour fish, and my favorite scrambled eggs with tomatoes. He didn't even take off his apron, sitting at the table watching me eat, a smile on his face. Chin, eat more. School food can't compare to home cooking. I ate and agreed, my eyes feeling a little hot. This meal was something I waited over a decade for and never got. In this lifetime, I'm going to eat a few more of these meals. The next afternoon, it was time for me to go back to school. My mom packed me a big bag Of food, some pickles she made, apples my dad bought, and a few packs of snacks she got from who knows where. I stood at the door holding that bag, looking at them both. Mom, Dad, I'm leaving, be careful on the road. My mom held my hand. Call when you get there, okay? Do you have enough money? If not, Mom can give you a bit more. I do, I have enough. All right then, hurry up, don't miss the bus. I nodded, turned around, and walked a few steps before glancing back. The two of them stood side by side at the door, waving at me. The setting sun shone on them, stretching their shadows long and thin. Suddenly, I remembered how they had stood at the door to see me off in my previous life. Back then, I didn't know it would be the last time I'd see my dad. Later, something happened to him, and he never came back. Dad, I suddenly called out. He paused. What's wrong? Remember, if that Mr. Lou comes looking for you again, make sure to call me first. He smiled and nodded. All right, I'll remember. I turned around and strode forward without looking back. I couldn't look back. If I did, I was afraid I wouldn't be able to leave. On the train, I leaned against the window, watching the fields fly by outside. It was getting dark, and the last hint of sunset dyed the horizon orange-red. I remembered that day under the bridge. My mom had closed her eyes in the same color. Back then, I couldn't do anything. Now it's different. I saved my dad's company. I bought my mom new clothes. I made sure they stood together, living well. That's more important than anything else. My phone rang, a message from Suchin. Xiaoqing, when are you coming back? I smiled at the message and replied, tomorrow. She responded instantly, I'll pick you up. I typed back 2 words, no need. Tucking my phone into my pocket, I continued gazing out the window. It was dark now, and distant villages lit up with scattered lights, like stars sprinkled on the ground. Suddenly, I thought of that pot hose. I wondered how it was doing now. It must have grown quite a bit bigger. On the day I returned to school, Suchin indeed didn't come to pick me up. When I pushed open the dormitory door, she was sitting on her bed. Seeing me come in, she immediately stood up. You're back? Yeah. I put down my luggage, took out the pickled vegetables my mom had packed for me from my bag, and placed them on the table. She walked over, standing beside me, hesitating to speak. If you have something to say, just say it. She bit her lip. Xiaoqing, the list of recommended admissions has been released. My heart stirred, but I kept my expression neutral. Really? Who got recommended? She looked at me, her eyes holding something complex, a mix of pride, unease, and a hint of expectation I couldn't quite decipher. Me? I nodded. Congratulations. She was taken aback, probably not expecting me to say that. You're not angry. Angry about what? It's just, she paused, about the things I did before. Don't you hate me? I turned around to look at her. She stood by the window, sunlight streaming in from behind her, casting her face in a somewhat blurry light, but I could still see what was in her eyes. It was a cautious probing, as if confirming whether her victory was truly secure. I hate you, I said, but congratulating you is a separate matter. She opened her mouth but said nothing. I picked up my wash basin and went to the washroom to freshen up. The washroom was empty, the water from the faucet gushing loudly. As I washed my face, my mind wandered back to what had just happened. The list of recommended admissions had been released, and she was on it. In my past life, around this time, she had been recommended to that school everyone wanted to attend. She posted a moment on social media with the caption, "A new beginning, thanks to everyone who has been with me along the way." Back then, I was crouched on a street corner, staring at that post, feeling as if I had been buried alive. In the following days, Suchin was very busy, handling procedures, hosting celebratory meals, posting on social media, thanking this person and that. She left early and returned late every day, always with a smile on her face, the kind of triumphant smile that comes with achieving one's goals. I ignored her, going to class as usual, to the library, and to the Friday book club. At the book club, Chinyu asked me, "That Suchin, is she the one you mentioned before?" I nodded. She got recommended. He looked at me, his expression somewhat complicated. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "What's meant to come will come." He didn't ask any more questions. That day's discussion was on ancient style, and I had prepared a week's worth of remarks. After I finished speaking, Professor Zhou, as usual, offered a few comments, then suddenly said, "Wang Xiaoqing, the editorial department said your paper received quite a positive response. Someone wants to commission an article from you." I was taken aback. Commission an article? Yes, the editor-in-chief of a magazine that specializes in publishing such articles is a friend of mine. He read your piece and thought it was well written, so he wants you to write another one. I nodded. Okay. After leaving the conference room, Chinyu caught up with me. Congratulations. Congratulations. What commission? He smiled. That's a proper academic journal. Not many undergraduates get published there. I smiled back. Luck, not luck, he said. It's skill. We walked side by side across campus, the streetlights casting long shadows. When we reached the entrance of Building 15, he stopped. "See you at noon." I turned and headed inside. After a few steps, I suddenly heard him call out to me, "Wang Xiaoqing." I looked back. He stood under the streetlight, his white shirt glowing in the light. "If Suqin bothers you again, let me know." I was stunned. "Let you know? What can you do?" He smiled. "I have my ways." I didn't ask further and turned to go upstairs. Back in the dorm, Suqin wasn't there. Her bed was empty, half of her belongings neatly packed, a suitcase standing in the corner. After completing the admission procedures, she would be moving out soon. Looking at that suitcase, I suddenly remembered my past life. In my past life, on the day she moved out, I helped her pack and walked her downstairs. She hugged me and cried, saying she couldn't bear to leave. I told her we'd keep in touch, and I believed it. Moved to tears. Later, I found out she moved out because the school she was admitted to had arranged a dormitory for her. Meanwhile, I was still worrying about final exams, still anxious about whether I'd pass. She was running ahead, and I was chasing behind, never catching up. No, it wasn't that I couldn't catch up, I never even tried. I thought friends didn't need to chase each other. I thought her kindness was genuine. I thought the world was fair. How foolish. My phone rang with a WeChat notification. It was from an unfamiliar number, but I knew who it was. "Hello, Wang Xiaoqing. This is Teacher Zhang from the department office. Regarding Suqin's recommendation qualification, someone has submitted some materials, and we need your cooperation to verify them. Please come to the department office tomorrow at 10 a.m. I stared at the message, my heart skipping a beat. Someone had submitted materials. Who? I replied with okay, put down my phone, and lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Who? Could it be Qinyu, or Li Meng, or maybe Suqin herself? No, it couldn't be her, she's not that foolish. Then who? The next day at 9:50 a.m., I arrived at the department office. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear voices inside. I knocked and heard Teacher Zhang's voice. "Come in." Pushing the door open, I saw several people inside, Teacher Zhang, the department head, and Professor Zhou. The three of them were sitting on the sofa, with several documents spread out on the coffee table. In front of them, "Wang Xiaoqing is here." Teacher Zhang waved me over. "Sit." I sat down and glanced at the documents. The top one was a printed chat log. I skimmed it. It was a WeChat screenshot. The profile pictures of the two people in the conversation were blurred, but the content was clear. "I've already talked to Li Meng, and she'll testify for me." "Did you hide the note?" "Yes, absolutely no one will find it. Once this is over, we can discuss the recommendation spot." My heart skipped a beat. These were the exact words Suqin had spoken during her phone call in the washroom early that morning, but how had it been recorded, and how did it end up here? "Wang Xiaoqing," the department head spoke, his voice serious. "These materials were submitted by an anonymous whistleblower and involve Suqin's premeditated attempt to frame someone before the midterm exams. We need your cooperation to verify some details." I nodded. "Go ahead. Are you aware of the conversations in these chat logs?" I fell silent for a few seconds, my mind racing. Anonymous whistleblower, chat logs, the phone call at 1:20 a.m. Who? Only Suqin and I knew about this. I couldn't have reported Suqin, and I certainly couldn't have fabricated chat logs out of thin air. Then who else? Unless someone else had overheard it that night besides me. "Wang Xiaoqing." I snapped back to attention. "I'm aware," I said. That night, I was outside the washroom and heard Suqin's phone call with my own ears. The department head and Teacher Zhang exchanged a glance. Professor Zhou sat silently beside them, watching me the whole time, his eyes holding something I couldn't decipher. "Can you describe the situation in detail?" I began recounting everything, from waking up early that morning, to following Suqin downstairs, to pushing open the door of the third-floor washroom, to the words she spoke on the phone. I repeated it all, word for word, exactly as it happened. After I finished, the room fell silent for a long time. The department head took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Why didn't you report this at the time?" I looked at him. "Because I had no evidence," I said. I carefully examined those screenshots, the tone of the conversation, the choice of words, even the punctuation habits, all were exactly like Suqin's. "It was her," I said. "I'm sure." The department head didn't say anything more, and Teacher Zhang collected the documents, looking at me. "Wang Xiaoqing, thank you for your cooperation. Regarding today's matter, please do not disclose it to anyone until the investigation results are out." I nodded, stood up, and walked out. Just as I reached the door, Professor Zhou suddenly called out to me, "Wang Xiaoqing." I turned around, and he was sitting on the sofa, looking at me, his eyes bright behind his glasses. "It's fine now. Go ahead." I pulled the door open and walked out into the empty hallway. Sunlight streamed in through the windows, falling on the floor. I stood there, taking a deep breath. Who was it? Who on earth was it? In the afternoon, the Answer came. I received a WeChat message from Chinyu. Are you free tonight? Let me treat you to dinner. Looking at those words, I suddenly understood something. 6 o'clock in the evening, at the small restaurant near the school's back gate, Chinyu was sitting by the window, 2 cups of tea placed in front of him. Seeing me come in, he stood up and smiled. You're here, have a seat. I sat down and looked at him. Was it you? He didn't deny it. It was me. How did you know? He picked up his teacup and took a sip. That day, someone in your dorm was making a phone call in the washroom, and I happened to be there too. I was stunned. What were you doing in our dorm building? Looking for a junior, he said. He lives on the 3rd floor. As I was leaving, I passed by the washroom and heard someone inside on the phone, saying things that didn't sound right, so I recorded it. I looked at him, not knowing what to say. I was silent for a moment. Thank you, you're welcome, he said. I didn't do it for you. I was taken aback. Then why? He looked out the window and fell silent for a few seconds. I had a friend once who was harmed in the same way. The guaranteed admission spot, the cheat sheet, exactly the same trick. She wasn't as lucky as you. She didn't make it through. His voice was calm, but I saw something in his eyes, a wound from long ago, scarred over but not fully healed. So you helped me because of that. You could say that. He turned back to look at me. It's also a way for me to make peace with myself. I didn't know what to say. The food arrived, and he urged me to eat. I picked up my chopsticks, took a bite, and as I ate, something suddenly occurred to me. How did you get those chat records? He glanced at me. Li Meng gave them to me. I paused with my chopsticks. Li Meng. Yes. He took a bite of food. After she was caught with the cheat sheet, she knew Su Qin had sold her out. Later, I went to find her, played her the recording, and she told me everything. Those chat records were saved on her phone. I put down my chopsticks and leaned back in my chair. Li Meng, that quiet, low-profile girl, the roommate Su Qin had used as a pawn and who ended up taking the fall for everything, had actually turned against her. Wasn't she afraid of getting implicated? She was already implicated, Chinyu said. She took the punishment for the cheat sheet. But compared to what Su Qin did, her mistake was nothing. Making up for it might even lighten her sentence. I nodded and didn't say anything more. After the meal, he walked me back to the dorm. When we reached the building, he stopped. See you on Friday. See you on Friday. I turned to go inside, but after a few steps, I suddenly looked back. Senior, he stood under the streetlight and turned to look at me. What happened to your friend later? He was silent for a moment. She dropped out. I heard she went south after that, and we never contacted each other again. I nodded. I hope she's doing well now. He smiled slightly. She will be. I turned and went upstairs. 3 days later, Su Qin's guaranteed admission qualification was revoked. The news was announced by Teacher Zhang during a department meeting, citing academic misconduct and the submission of false materials during the qualification review process. The specifics weren't disclosed, but everyone knew what had happened. That afternoon, when I returned to the dorm, Su Qin was sitting on her bed, her suitcase sprawled open on the floor, clothes haphazardly stuffed inside. Seeing me enter, she looked up, her eyes swollen and red, tear stains on her face, her hair a tangled mess. She looked like a madwoman. Are you satisfied now? Her voice was hoarse, like sandpaper scraping against glass. I stood at the door, watching her. Satisfied with what? Don't play dumb. She stood up and took a step toward me. It was you, wasn't it? You reported me, didn't you? I didn't say a word. How dare you? Her voice suddenly rose sharply. I worked so hard for so long. Do you think it was easy for me? How dare you ruin me? I looked at her twisted face, those fiery eyes, the person who once smiled so innocently, so guilelessly. Was it easy for you? I spoke, my voice calm. Bringing me a cup of coffee every day. Was that easy for you? Practicing with my notes for a whole semester. Was that easy for you? Letting Li Meng take the fall for you. Was that easy for you? Climbing up by stepping on my head. Was that easy for you? She froze. Do you know how I died in my past life? Her face changed. Past life. I ignored her and continued. I was expelled. My dad died in a car accident. My mom died of illness. I was squatting under a bridge, looking at your social media posts, watching you smile, watching you shine so brightly. You think you had it easy. What about me? Was it easy for me? You, what are you talking about? I walked up to her, looking down at her from above. Su Qin, you. No, I could have let it go. I could have ignored your little tricks and just lived my own life, but you wouldn't have it. You had to push me to the brink, had to trample me into the mud before you were satisfied. Her tears fell again. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I really was wrong. I watched her cry, looking at that face that once made me feel warmth, now twisted beyond recognition. You know what? I said. The way you look right now is exactly how I looked when I cried on the Streets in my past life. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with fear. You, who are you, really? I didn't answer, turned around and walked to the window, picking up that pot of pothos. It had grown quite large, its leaves lush and green, filling the entire pot, shimmering under the sunlight. This plant, I said. Do you remember? She stared at me blankly. In my past life, it died, drowned by you. I placed the pot back on the windowsill. This time, it lived. I turned to look at her. Suchin, I won't forgive you, but I won't kill you either. You'll live well, and watch how I live better than you. That's the greatest revenge. She opened her mouth but said nothing. I picked up my backpack, pulled open the door, and walked out. The hallway was quiet, sunlight streaming in through the windows, falling on the floor. I walked forward, 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, without looking back. A week later, Suchin moved out. On the day she left, I wasn't in the dorm. I had gone to a book club. When I returned, her bed was empty, leaving only the bare mattress. A few scraps of paper lay on the floor, probably dropped while packing. Li Meng also moved out, switching to another dorm. I heard her punishment wasn't revoked, but it wasn't escalated either. Before she left, she came to see me once and said sorry. I didn't say anything, and she left. The dorm was left with just me, for beds, for desks, for cabinets, and only me. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching the pothos by the window grow a few new leaves, lush and green. Glowing in the sunlight, my phone rang. It was my mom calling. Ching ching. Manager Lu really turned out just as your dad predicted. He came to see your dad again, saying he has a new project and wants your dad to invest. Your dad refused, and he even threatened to have someone deal with your dad. Your dad reported it to the police, and when they looked into it, that guy really had issues. He'd scammed several people before. I laughed as I listened. Mom, is Dad okay? He's fine, just a bit shaken, he said. Thank goodness I listened to you, or I'd have been in trouble. That's good. Ching ching. When are you coming home? Mom will make you something delicious. Next week. I don't have classes next week. Great. Mom will be waiting for you. After hanging up, I stared out the window, lost in thought. The sunlight was so nice, shining on the windowsill, on the pothos, and on my face, warm and comforting. My phone rang again. A message from Chinyu. Professor Zhou said he read your new draft. It's really good, and it'll be published in the next issue of the magazine. I replied, okay. He sent another message. Are you free this weekend? There's a lecture we could go to together. I thought for a moment and replied, okay. Putting down my phone, I stood up, walked to the window, pushed it open, and the wind blew in, carrying the coolness of autumn. There were people talking downstairs, laughter, footsteps. On the distant sports field, some were running, some were playing ball, some were sunbathing, living people living well. Me too. I turned around and glanced at those 4 empty beds. 1 was mine, 3 belonged to others, but I didn't feel emptiness, because I knew I was here to live, not to hate. Over the weekend, I went to listen to that lecture. The speaker was an elderly gentleman, his hair completely white, but his spirit was strong. He spoke all afternoon, from ancient literature to modern life, from reading to being a person. At the end, he asked the audience, what do you think reading is for? Some answered, to find a job. Some said, to gain knowledge. Others replied, to get a diploma. He smiled and said, let me tell you, reading is so that when you encounter something, you have a place to go. Sitting in the audience, hearing these words, I suddenly remembered that person under the bridge, calculating problems over and over in their mind. Back then, I had no books, no paper, no pen, only my mind, but I survived, because of those problems I had solved, those sentences I had memorized, those things that hadn't yet been used but had always stayed within me. After the lecture ended, Chinyu and I walked out together. It was dark, the street lights were on. He walked beside me and suddenly asked, what do you want to do in the future? I thought for a moment. Write things. Write what? Write about the things that should be remembered. He glanced at me and didn't ask further. When we reached the entrance of Building 15, he stopped. See you Friday. See you Friday. I turned and walked inside. After a few steps, I suddenly heard him speak from behind. Wang Xiaoqing. I turned around. He stood under the streetlight, his white shirt glowing in the light. There's a national Chinese competition next week. Would you like to participate? I was taken aback. Me. Yes. Professor Zhou recommended you. He said you could do it. I looked at him and suddenly smiled. Okay. He smiled too. Then it's settled. I turned and went upstairs. Pushed open the dormitory door, and it was pitch black inside. I turned on the light, and the room was instantly filled with brightness, for beds, for desks, for cabinets, and that pot of pothos on the windowsill. I walked over and touched its leaves, cool, smooth, and tender. Moonlight streamed in through the window, falling upon it. As I looked at it, I suddenly remembered what happened on the day I was reborn, that morning. Suchin handed me that cup of coffee, and I took it and poured it into this pot of flowers. At the time, it was almost dead, its leaves all yellow, drooping limply over the edge of the pot. I thought it wouldn't survive, but it did. Not only did it survive, but it grew better and better. Standing by the window, I looked at the pothose under the moonlight and suddenly smiled. My phone rang. It was a message from Chinyu. By the way, someone left a comment on your paper, saying it's really well written. I looked at the words and replied, "Who left it?" He replied, "Don't know, just a reader, a reader. I have a reader now." I put down my phone and looked out the window. Under the moonlight, the campus was quiet, the street lights below were lit, and a figure passed by. There are still classes tomorrow, a book club the day after, and that essay competition next week. There's still so much to do, and a long road ahead, but I'm not afraid, because I know that this time, I won't get lost again. I turned and looked at that pot of pothose. "Thank you," I said, "for staying alive with me." It didn't speak, just stood there quietly, its leaves lush and green, glowing under the moonlight. I turned off the light, lay down on the bed, and closed my eyes. It seemed as if someone was speaking in my ear, the voice from my past life, my mother's voice, the sound of the wind under the bridge. But I'm not afraid anymore, because those voices are in the past. Now is new.